the idea of living in an authoritarian state, so many people, I believe, out there are like, well, yeah, it does feel like that now, but it's not going to last. And I sort of feel like that is a problem because even if we assume that the Republicans don't manage to gerrymander away a Democratic control of the House, which, frankly, it's a real possibility, folks. There does not seem to be much of a limiting, a device to limit what Trump attempts to do. A lot of what he's attempting to do, they've sort of found a successful a mechanism to do what he wants to do, and that is basically lording government services and government functions over the various entities that make decisions in our society. And we saw this in the case of Jimmy Kimmel and others. We see it in the case of Mahmoud Khalil, who may be deported to some random country because of his involvement with, frankly, between Colombia and pro-Palestinian protesters and supporters. But, the time to worry about authoritarianism existing longer than you think it's just like as if it was going to automatically expire. The time to worry about this, frankly, was probably 6 months ago, 10 months ago, a year or two ago, maybe 10 years ago. But we're there now. This is what it feels like, where people are self-censoring, where people are afraid, where people, you have trans folks who are like, I'm trying to figure out how to get out of the country because my literal health and life and liberty is in already concrete terms, not just threatened, but in fact impaired. Down the road, those threats are there. Down the road, it could be even worse. And it's also the case for a whole cohort of people. I don't know if you got that video too, Brian, I put in about that 80-year-old. Maybe you guys played that.
Yeah, it's in there.
Okay. We are living in an authoritarian society now. That's not hyperbole. It is just simply the case. Now, are there ranges within that authoritarianism? Of course. But we have crossed the threshold. When people are afraid, and we're talking about the law firms, we're talking about the universities, we're talking about corporations, we're talking about individuals, where the vice president of the United States gets on a radio show and says, go get people fired for not showing enough deference to someone associated with the administration. I'm sorry. That's what authoritarianism is.
And I've been thinking a bit about how leadership and folks in power have an effect on the rest of society. We've lived under Trump, this specter over our politics for around 10 years at this point. And it's not just Trump. It's obviously what we're seeing with Israel committing genocide, even Russia taking the opportunity to invade Ukraine, where there is a complete breakdown enabled by the failures of liberalism economically, in the liberal international order as well, in which might makes right, and that comes home to us eventually. And it also is interesting to me how the nation's almost character and the way it interacts with the world is reflected too in what you're describing, this people not being able to fully contemplate this happening to us. So that's what happens in other countries. That's maybe what we do to other countries. But that can't come home to us. And the other leadership that has enabled this is the Democratic Party, that has not met the moment in any capacity, that has capitulated over and over again to this. And that level of weakness also has an effect and doesn't give people the oxygen to resist in the way that they were doing in 2016 post, right? Like, for all of our issues about the resistance and, hey, I thought there was too much focus on Russia, less focus on material issues. There was some people being cringe, God forbid, whatever. I would love for some more earnestness back in our society once again. But that showed that we did limit him the first time to a degree. I mean, he did a lot of damage, but the leadership from Democrats fighting him on everything had an impact.
I mean, part of that also was just that they weren't as prepared to do what they're doing as they are this time. I mean, Project 2025, incidentally, the FCC chair wrote the communication section on in Project 2025. A lot of this stuff is part of that playbook. So, you know, the Trump and his minions are far more prepared this time around to run this playbook. But it is the case, and we'll play a clip from Chuck Schumer where he's starting to show at least setting the table maybe for a government shutdown. But understand, he enabled this. He is 8 months too late on this. And even still, he's out there, you know, bemoaning Jimmy Kimmel getting fired, bemoaning the actions of the FCC chair. But up until days ago was, and maybe still is, 100% earnestly trying to figure out some type of fig leaf deal that Republicans would sign on to, that he could pretend like he got something so that he could fund this government that is doing all these bad things that he's talking about. Right. I mean, like, it is a completely, and even still, and we will give him a modicum of credit for at least like maybe setting the table for a government shutdown. But still, the framing of it is still just sort of like they're living in 1995.
How about the optics of being somebody who had his statement on Mahmoud Khalil's detention was very mealy-mouthed, but now that a wealthy white liberal entertainer is impacted, which, want to be clear, this is an enormously scary moment and it's an attack on the First Amendment, and obviously we support Kimmel and his staff, but does the Democratic Party, it doesn't help their disconnect from the average voter when this is when he decides to basically take a stand here, and not the people that were being punished for their speech in the first 9 months of this administration,
or even the last administration.
Right.
Like, this McCarthyite period started under the Democrats.
Look, the fact is that the entire hysteria, and I'm not saying that there is an anti-Semitism in our society. I've experienced it as a child. I've experienced it as an adult. It exists. I have a long list, but the hysteria as a way of trying to silence protest about what Israel is doing and ginning up the anti-Semitism, that set up everything that happened in terms of Trump going after these universities. That set up everything that Trump did in terms of going after these law firms. That has been used now as and it's ironic in many respects, but it has been used on Khalil, used on a graduate student who's just writing an op-ed in Massachusetts.
Yep.
I mean, on and on. And once it is used under the cover of anti-Semitism, suddenly that tool, people are very, very comfortable swinging that hammer around in other contexts. So, I mean, so much, and to the point where, like, he funds the government, and I do mean Chuck Schumer funded the government because it was his, group of 7 senators that broke the filibuster. He funds the government, and just like as if to just sort of illustrate what we're talking about, because he's got to go out on book tour for his book about anti-Semitism.
Pro-Israel, his number one job, according to him.
Yep. And so all of this is tied in. But the point being, we're at a point now where there's two things that are clear. Or I should say, one thing is clear. We're living within an authoritarian, our country is under authoritarian rule. And that doesn't mean it can't get a lot worse. It surely can. But things aren't trending in the right way. And so there's really two things we have to do simultaneously. One is we have to fight that authoritarianism. And there's a whole myriad ways of doing that, starting with expand your social circle, organize, just like you're not doing anything directly, but you are building the relationships because, Sam Harris once called me or said my behavior was psychopathic because we were going after a Dave Rubin like he was the wounded elk or something like this, or caribou. And
wounded antelope, according to Rogan.
Antelope, right. And the idea being, we pull apart the IDW folks one person at a time. And there was definitely, we weren't that, I think, calculating about it, but that's how it's done. If you can find people who are isolated, much easier to take them out. If the administration can show that they can take out Jimmy Kimmel, he'll be fine. Then it sends a message to everybody else that you are much more vulnerable. So organizing either in the context of your workplace, in your apartment building, just in your neighborhood, amongst your friends, that's really important. Standing up in situations like ICE, protecting vulnerable people in your community, immigrants, trans folk, whomever it is, that's important. Standing up to authoritarianism when you see it sends a message to other people that it's doable. And then the other half of what needs to be done is we need to have a political leadership that addresses the moment and has the ability and the competence to do so. And we don't have that. So, it may seem inconsistent to both say we've got to develop some type of social cohesion to push back against the authoritarianism on one hand, and on the other hand, be critical of political leaders who fail to meet the moment, even though ostensibly they are on our side in the sense that they're most likely to be the vehicle for our set of policies that we want. But you need competence, right? That's important.
And not being corrupted. How do you create more competent democratic leadership? You make them more responsive to the democratic will of the people, right? And that's what the critique. I think a lot of people are coming around to this notion that it's not about criticizing Democrats for clicks or for the sake of doing so. It's because there's a recognition amongst folks like us that the Democratic Party at this moment in history is the party that in our two-party system that has to get elected to combat this. But we can't just elect them for the sake of it because we saw what that looked like, right? It's not durable. It's not long lasting if you just run in opposition to one guy.
You have to cultivate democracy and do things to cultivate it, just like the Republicans do things to cultivate fascism.
And they cultivate it by being responsive to their own base. Because in this era of explosion of dark money, post-Citizens United, where everybody knows our politics are undemocratic and they see it on their phones because no one understands why the F this genocide is still going on, for example. And they see our government doing unspeakable things. That's why Epstein is a stand-in for a level of democratic responsiveness, because people basically feel like this is all they can ask. We have such little civic engagement. Trump has helped kill it, but also a Democratic Party that didn't bring anybody into a primary process with this last election.
Missed the cost of living stuff.
Well, that I think is
just talks around and talks down and tries to manipulate the base from the top and cuts off the over 90% of their base right now that say, we don't support what's happening. We don't want to fund Israel anymore. How can you be an opposition party that that has effectiveness when you are not democratic in the smaller, lowercase version of democracy?
It just ends up being a failure. I mean, they specifically told their canvassers, don't send us information as to what voters are saying about Gaza and Israel. Like, that is the point. The point of being a small d Democrat or democratic is because you work more not necessarily efficiently, but better ultimately but if you are literally saying we're not going to record comments on this major issue because we don't want to know. We know, and so we don't want any proof that we know. And they buried their heads in the sand, and then they missed the ball on the economy. And Trump is also missing the ball on the economy. I think broadly speaking, our society, or at least our media, is missing the ball on the economy. Let's look at this clip number. We're going to get to David Cleon in a few minutes. But here is clip number 10. And this is, this is going to be helpful. This is going to be helpful, hopefully, in the event that there are elections in 26 and 28. But this is number 10.
To feel that, because we do see polling that doesn't poll well in the economy. The recent Fox polling said 52% say the economy is worse under this administration. You've got unemployment at the highest rate in 4 years. Groceries made a big jump in the last term. So how is that? You're looking forward with these plans that you just talked about. When will people feel that, Mr.
Well,
Trump?
when the factories start opening. I mean, right now we're building them. And, Fox polling, I have to tell you, I've told you before, it's the worst polling I've ever had. It's always, during the election, they had me winning by a little bit, not by a massive amount. And
can you pause it? Polling, you didn't win by a massive amount. You didn't get to 50% in the popular vote.
What? Okay. Bleeding from everywhere.
Fox polling. Okay, Rupert Murdoch.
Okay. Vigeland polling.
Roberta Murdoch.
Okay.
Worst polling I've ever seen them. And, Fox polling, I have to tell you, I've told you before, it's the worst polling I've ever had. It's always, during the election, they had me winning by a little bit, not by a massive amount. And Fox polling, I've told Rupert Murdoch, go get yourself a new pollster because he stinks. And this is
going to feel that.
Did you tell him that in the litigation when you were suing him in court because the Wall Street Journal accurately reported on you signing Jeffrey Epstein's birthday book? What's the status of that, by the way?
What is a birthday book? I never even heard of a birthday book.
Yeah, I'm actually born on a leap year.
My understanding is it's birthday card.
Card? Book?
Who does books?
Okay, now it's a full book? Well, I'm confused.
Okay, JR token.
His refusal to accept where the economy is at this point is going to be helpful down the road. The economy itself is not going to be helpful. It's going to be painful for people because it's going to get worse. But here's put up 10A just to give an idea of where his polling is on this. It's bad.
So this is comparing the economy in his first term versus the second term, and you can see he's minus 22 at this point versus basically having positive numbers the entire time his first term. He dipped below a little bit towards the beginning of his presidency, but even at the end there with COVID, I guess there was the subsidies that were coming out at that time.
He's fallen off a cliff.
But the checks and things like that.
This is his net approval handling of the economy. It is minus 22. He's in bad shape. But here is what's going on with the economy, and this this is what the Biden people missed. And we talked about this, but there's now much more data to support this theory, which is that we have two essentially economies in this country. We have one that exists for rich people, and its numbers obscure what the rest of the country is going through. So here is this. This is clip 11. This is from the BLS. I mean, and there's a story in Bloomberg that outlines this as well. Consumers in the top 10% of income distribution, and this shows essentially like the top 20%. Top 20% and the top, I guess, 4%. The economy is like their spending is just keeps going up and up and up. And it's basically flat for the rest of the 80% of the country. Consumers in the top 10% of the income distribution accounted for 49.2% of total spending in the second quarter. That is the highest since a blip in 1989. Do we have that other graph? I don't think so. Maybe it was
Here it is.
Yeah, here it is. You can see this. Look at where you had about 1/3 of the spending, essentially 1/3 of the economy was a function of the top 10% in income distribution in this country back in 1992. And now it's 50%.
Well, I blame immigrants and trans people.
It's all the rich immigrant and trans people who are up there, pushing up the economy for just them and hiding the fact of what's going on in the 80% of this country. And so when you have 10% of the country providing 50% of the economic activity, when you have 20% providing probably close to 80% of the economic activity, maybe 75% of the economic activity, all of the measures that we have used traditionally to measure the health of the economy give you skewed numbers. Your GDP, whatever it is, it gives you skewed numbers. And, at one point it may catch up, but it certainly destabilizes society, and it certainly makes for the vast majority of Americans to be unhappy. And the idea that like the Biden administration couldn't figure this out, and now obviously the Trump administration doesn't, I don't even know if they care, is a problem for the bottom line is like you have 80% of Americans for whom the economy doesn't work.
It's crazy that, decades of tax cuts has led to just a incredibly imbalanced economy and
Wealth
lack of public
inequality.
investment.
This is a wealth inequality story. This is concentrating wealth at the top. And it's incredibly destabilizing, as just a broad, it can lead to things like, I don't know, fascism, authoritarianism, etc.
There'll be a little disturbance.
A little.
But we're okay with that.
And by the way,
won't be much.
Oh, sorry.
All right, we've got to get to.
He keeps going. But can I just say, tax cuts, big ugly ass bill. It hasn't even hit yet, which is going to pronounce this situation.
Yeah. Oh, it's going to get much, much worse.
Yeah.
And we're about to crash into a massive bump in health insurance costs. Massive. Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.